welcome to a special episode of New Hope Underground. And this is an episode featuring a roundtable discussion we had a while back with several people that work specifically with people who are hurting. You know, people who run into financial issues, people who are facing poverty situations, and sometimes people who are facing other kinds of issues and addictions and hurts. And I just thought it'd be a great discussion to have because we've been talking on New Hope Underground and some of our Jesus talks about what Jesus says about the poor and also just how we should be in this world. And so I thought, what a great discussion to have. And so we originally had this planned because it went along with the particular series that we were going to do here at church, but the series did not actually materialize. But I did not want to waste this discussion. I wanted you to hear it. It's a good discussion. So I'm going to play that now in its entirety. And the people who came in, I'm going to let them introduce themselves as the podcast gets going. So here you go, our roundtable discussion.
Okay, hi, I'm Nicole Eversole, and I'm a caseworker at Kemmer Village. And pretty much what I do is help families get back together. And so I deal with foster parents, biological parents, and kiddos. Everyone, yeah.
So you work with division.
I work with division.
In a lot of ways. Trying to bring some people together a little bit for the sake of a child.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess the motivation behind it started with kids. I just love them. And I just want them to have the best life they can. And I want the kids to know they have someone on their side. And sometimes they believe me, and sometimes they don't.
Well, silly question, but why do you love kids?
Gosh. Well, I love a specific age of kids. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it's the way.
Go ahead. Confess everything. There's only a lot of people listening. Don't worry.
Everyone's listening. No, I do love all kids, but I have a special place for, like, junior high.
Okay.
And they still have, like, that kid mentality, but they can be serious in the next sentence. And it's just, wow.
You bet.
And
trying to figure out how to be an adult in the midst of all that at the same time.
Yeah. And I can relate to that.
But still.
Yeah. Like, I'm with you. And they teach you a lot. You know, you think you're going to go into it like, I'm going to change these kids. And they end up changing you.
So a lot of the families you work with, you would classify as fairly low income families. And obviously we're going to be talking in generalities throughout this whole podcast, just so everybody knows that.
Right.
Because I realize not everybody fits into a rich box or a poor box or anything like that. It's more about us just trying to get a handle on culture, and also for us to have a discussion that specifically when it concerns the people less fortunate, because we want to gain compassion. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But thank you. How about you, Amy?
Okay, so I'm Amy Reynolds. I am a supervisor in a probation department in Coles and Cumberland County, and I also serve as the drug court coordinator for Coles County Drug Court.
Wow, that seems like a lot.
Sometimes it is.
What exactly? I really am curious, because you and I have talked a little bit, but I really am more curious as to what exactly does a probation person do? I mean, is it solely working with prison systems?
No, it's not working with prison. That would be a parole officer.
Okay.
I mean, we do get people to come out of prison and are on probation, but our typical caseload is just strictly probation, whether it's juvenile or adult. And so we basically enforce the court or the judge's order, telling them they need to go to treatment or do community service or whatever the court is telling them they need to do. We try to enforce that. We make referrals. We work with DCFS. We work with law enforcement. We work with treatment providers, mental health, substance abuse, and trying to get the people to change their behavior, which then changes their life.
So you work with a lot of different services then for people. I mean, So I'm guessing you experience firsthand, being with families
Yes.
and seeing how that's all connected together, families and behavior and everything else, I guess.
Yes, we have the person on probation, but yet we go into their homes, we see how they live, we see their children, we see their parents, we go to the schools, talk to their teachers, and we're kind of involved in basically every aspect of their life in some circumstances or whatever they'll let us into. And we really, our main focus is really to help them change their behavior so that they don't come back through our doors. It's just not always successful.
Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm anxious to get into some discussion and to see also how poverty tends to really play a big role into the things you see as well. Austin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep. So I'm Austin Haddock. I am a DCFS investigator out of Peoria, Tazewell, and Woodford County. Up out of Peoria is where we're based out of. I've been in this field specifically for about 5 years, with the department since 2018, so 2 years. Prior to that, I did casework with foster kids as well. So
You did foster care too?
Yep, I did. Yeah, I did placement.
That's what I do.
Yep. So I did that for 3 years with specifically specialized teenage boys, and that's probably my favorite group is just a lot of those the boys specifically, because I feel like I can relate a little more because I still have like a teenage boy sense of humor. So
Right.
like we laugh about the same stuff and just
Yeah, Darren has a teenage boy sense of humor too.
Oh, yeah.
He did placement with teenage boys.
I pretty much grew up a teenager.
Yeah.
Still am.
So you guys have that in common, I guess.
We have that in common.
Yep.
But he's an investigator now.
Yeah. Now you and I have had some conversations, Austin, already. I mean, really amazing some of the things you see, and you're in Peoria area. I think you probably already mentioned that, but so
Yep.
It's a little bit of a different area than being down here. You're originally from Windsor.
Yep.
So you're from a
from
small
Windsor,
town.
Illinois. So graduated from Eastern there in Charleston, Coles County. So yep. And yeah, I mean, Peoria is just different. I mean, it's very people give it the nickname Little Chicago, and it's very bigger city based, like in comparison to Mattoon, Charleston, Windsor, Effingham areas. It's just different.
Yeah, I've heard it called Little Chicago before, so I can see how it's different than the rural area down here compared to up there.
Yeah, I imagine there's some vast differences, actually, I would think. But, hey, I'm really interested in some of the discussion we have, how you can shed some light, and because of your experiences being a little bit different than even ours. So we're going to move on with some questions. And what I'm going to do, if it's okay, I'm just going to throw out a couple questions, and and then just converse here. That's what we're about here today. So I kind of want to make sure everyone knows that's listening that we're really not trying to solve anything. I mean, there's no way we're solving the divide between rich and poor with one sermon or one lesson or one discussion. No one ever expects that. That's far-fetched. But I think what we're trying to do is that in the end, what I'm hoping, at least with the direction of where we're headed, is I think we lost Austin, but I think we got him back.
Nope, I'm good. Yeah, sorry.
Hear him okay?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I accidentally hit a button. Sorry.
He hit a button. It's all
okay.
good.
I do that all the time. Okay, so basically, one thing that's real important, I think, for us to understand as we're kind of proceeding with this discussion is that we just acknowledge the fact that there is a divide between rich and poor in a way in our country. It's not clear cut. It's kind of gray. It's not necessarily just black and white in that regard, but there is tension, if you will. There's tension, and it's systematic, if you will. What I mean by that is it's really down deep in the system, and it's hard for you guys kind of work in the system, if you will, it's kind of hard to get a handle on how in the world we can help such overwhelming issues and problems. But let me ask this question first, and this may be, this is just an opinion question, but I think it'd be interesting to hear what you guys have to say. When I say rich and poor, what do you think of when you hear rich? Just be honest. Contextually.
I think of like Beverly Hills,
That's the rich.
like they're loaded,
Right.
people
have so much money they can't count it, that kind of thing.
and they don't know what to do with it.
They're bored.
They're, yeah,
Poor
pretty
people.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're bored.
They're bored.
Okay, so when you think of rich, you think of Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
Rich. What about you, Amy?
I can see that. I asked Darren that same question because I said it kind of changes a little bit of the answer, but I think sometimes poor people see people who pay their bills and work and are blessed to be able to get what they need financially. They see us as rich. So
Right.
I was like, are we talking about the really, really wealthy, the really, really rich, or are we talking about normal people who work, pay their bills, and have left over at the end
Middle
of the
class.
month? Yeah, upper class.
Yeah. So to the poor, a lot of people are rich, including people who don't really have a lot. Like we wouldn't say that we're rich, would we? But at the same time, I wouldn't say I'm poor.
Right.
Right.
So,
Right down the
but
middle.
some people would. It's just the way you view their perception, I guess.
Right.
What do you think of, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it really is based on perception. I mean, when I think of rich, it's, I'm thinking of, just people who have enough money, like so much money, they just don't know what to do with, just spending on just whatever, just to blow their money. But it's like, then when you're thinking about people who really are poor, it's like they would see, just your average people who are, paying their bills on time. They have a house, they have a car, like they're not paying rent, that type of thing. Even just they'd see like lower middle class as being rich,
Right. So it's kind of depending on your class on what you think rich and poor is.
So you kind of agree it's about perception.
Yeah. It's really based on perception, I would say, to some extent.
Awesome. I think it's important to answer this question in a way, simply because when we go forward with our conversation, like I said, we're going to be speaking in generalities. But I'm really, I guess in one way, when you look at the scripture and what Jesus teaches, I mean, obviously he spent a lot of time talking about the poor, helping the poor, reaching out to the poor. The New Testament is full of commands about helping the poor. We can talk about Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus says, to the least of these. It's not just the poor, but also people who are hurting, sick or in prison, or don't have clothes, don't have food. So he even gets very specific. James even says that true religion is this, that we help widows and orphans. So and James just he just goes on a rip roar kind of sermon in his book about against the rich, really. What he would consider the rich. But I think it's interesting because in those days, in that culture, there was such a huge division. It was the real rich and the real poor. I mean, and the masses were the real poor. And so it's a little bit harder of a discussion in some ways when you consider a middle class in that discussion. But I think what I want to do is I want us to really focus in our discussion to understand, like to assume, if we will. I would like to make this assumption, whether we feel it's right or not. Let's make this assumption that we are the rich. Let's make that assumption that when we say people are less fortunate, we're talking about people who can't hardly make it, week to week. Sometimes they don't have food on the table. Sometimes, their families are maybe even generations of issues and problems that keep them in poverty. So American poverty is different than other countries. I've been to other countries and seen poverty in those situations that it's hard to even talk about. It's basically ineffable because of the fact that the things I saw were people had absolutely zero. I mean, they had dirt and a few things to put up, like a cardboard box for a house. I mean, and I'm not trying to make light of the poor in America, but I would like to say that we sitting here right now, and most people who are listening to this, we have to classify ourselves as rich in this discussion, in my opinion. So, what would you guys think are some of the commonalities with those that you deal with on a regular basis that are in poverty or in low income? Some of the commonalities that they have, like characteristics or attributes, or just things that they have in common. Anybody?
I think it's mostly generational. I mean, I know it can be circumstances, but I think it's mostly generational, and that they have barriers that are just passed down after generation. Lack of affordable housing, lack of education, lack of social support. They have no support to help them or teach them to strive to do better. So I think it's a lot of different things. They have limited resources that we have access to, or we have easy access to, and they don't. They don't have supportive people in their life pushing them to do better or be better.
So would you say one of the common things about people in poor situations is that it's a generational type of, that's pretty common?
I think so.
Would you guys agree or disagree? What have you seen?
Yeah, I would say that I would agree with that for sure. I mean, we see it like with our investigations, or like, kids that do end up coming into foster care. We see it a lot where it's like you can look in our database system and it shows like, they had involvement and were in foster care from 96 to 98. And then it's like you can look even farther sometimes and see, not only were this parent, but then it's like the grandparent was in DCFS care, foster care, because sometimes our records in certain cases can go back that far, just to where you can really see in our database like the just the breakdown of where it's been. They've had DCFS involvement with family members going back to sometimes 1985, or, sometimes even I've seen some that had 50-year retentions that went back to like 65, which we didn't have the computer records, but our records are like can go back that far,
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yep.
With the generational, he was talking about, we'll see foster kids, and then we'll see in the records the parents' involvement, and then the grandparents' involvement, and then generation after generation. So I think
so. It's very common.
Yeah, they nailed it. Go ahead.
I think it's also some learned behavior because it's what they know, it's what they're comfortable with, and they just keep repeating that. So they don't ever get out of that because it's all they know, and they don't have anybody to show them that it can be different, or they don't have the resources to make it different.
I think that's astute. I think the thing, I got a hard question that's not on your list. You ready for this?
Uh-oh.
How much of it do you think is because of our system? Like, in other words, people stay in generational poverty because they never get out because we have a system that doesn't ever want to let them out.
I mean, personally, I think our system is broken. It doesn't work. It is too easy for these people to take advantage of the system. On the other side, you have other people who are too prideful to take the help. So it doesn't help necessarily the people who really need it, but it needs to teach them skills, social skills, how to gain support, how to get the education they need to make things different and to become financially and basically independent in all areas of their life. And public aid should be temporary, but it's too easy not to be.
So for some people, I mean, the system has afforded them help to actually get out of their generational poverty in lots of ways. Is that what you're saying? But they just, some don't take it, or some feel like it's easier to stay on the system. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we have people that struggle with, if they work too much, then they lose food stamps, so then they don't work so that they can keep those food stamps. And I mean, and they do get a lot of money staying home, and I think it's a big struggle But I think there needs to be more education, more skills to help them budget and prepare to become independent. I don't think we do that.
What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand what you're saying with that for sure. Even seeing it here, I mean, I think the housing is a big issue in Peoria. Darren and I had talked about this previously, but just the way that Peoria's like Section 8, like subsidized housing set up, just sets people up completely and totally for failure. Just in the sense that it's all just isolated, like in the same area where you've got, people running drugs and, there's shootings and violence and everything. And it's just all kind of in this, one area that's 2, 3, 4 square miles, something like that in downtown Peoria. And there's really not as much housing spread throughout the area to get people out of that situation. And that's Peoria's, in my opinion, it's Peoria's city in general that has kind of made it to where the only housing is going to be in this specific area because we don't want the other parts of Peoria getting bad from having these people in different places. I don't know if that.
So it literally segregates them.
But yeah, I mean, it really
one section.
Yep.
To where they can't break out of low income housing. Is there many jobs around there in that section?
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, especially, well, it was like right before COVID, I think, like it's like a food desert. Like, they've got to take public transportation for 35, 40 minutes. Sometimes I would think to get to Walmart or to get to, really, there's corner stores where they're going to pay $5 for a gallon of milk, $6 for a gallon of milk, whereas it would be $1.50 or something at, Walmart. So, like, because there used to be like a Kroger, there were a couple Krogers and a couple different grocery stores that were in the area that shut down, I think, just with going bankrupt, or I don't know what the actual issue itself was, but nobody wants to be down in those areas because there's, you're seeing armed robberies and what have you there, to where these stores really don't want to be open there,
Yeah, that makes sense with crime. You don't want to open a business in a neighborhood where there's crime.
So in some ways, it's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but some ways it's kind of cyclical. And when you try to better yourself a little bit, but the resources that are open to you are, for instance, like you said, in housing areas that are somewhat isolated, which also means neighborhoods and communities that are somewhat isolated, which means your options are not as many. Is that what you're saying a little bit?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really. I'm going to say something that's, like I said, we're speaking in generalities, like we've been talking about that this whole time. But I want to ask this question because I think that most people, I'm just being honest. I think I'm just going to lay it on the line here. I think a lot of middle class people don't understand that cycle, and we ask the question constantly between each other. Why can't some of those people in those poverty situations, why can't they just move and get out of it? Why don't they just get a job? Why don't they just, we apply ourselves and what we do to their situation. How would you respond? Because you guys see a lot of different situations. It's not just that easy, is it? I mean, I think there's a lot of people who assume it is.
I think if we had those answers, we wouldn't have a poverty problem.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, if we had that, and I'm guilty of having that same thought, of just, why can't you just get it together? But the opportunities just aren't there like they are for us. And I think it's hard I think you're right. I think it's hard for us to understand that because we've had opportunities. And I think what he was saying of the community in Peoria, where they kind of shove that quote unquote class of people over in this one section, there's nobody opening businesses there.
Right.
Because of
the opportunities
crime.
are really slim.
Right. So they have taken the opportunities from them almost, it sounds like. I mean, I don't want to make assumptions, but
I just think that, I guess what I'm saying is I think that a lot of people in middle class are under the impression that if people would just change this behavior or change that behavior, they would just solve all their problems. But I'm not so sure that, I guess we shouldn't be operating, my concern is, are we operating out of arrogance or are we operating out of compassion? And do you really think, I guess what I want to hear is you guys work with people every day. I mean, surely you work with some good people who are trying that just, it just seems like they just kind of go back to the generational thing. Do you have any, I don't know, examples or just, where's your heart at with them?
I mean, I would say specifically, just kind of with going back to that area in Peoria, it's, that's where their family's at. I mean, all of their family, all of their friends, like everybody they know, like live, work if they do work, what have you in that area. And so for them to like leave, like they'd be disconnected from, their personal, support system. And I think that kind of draws them back in, when they do get out. For example, at least that's one example I would say is just where you get the whole family's down there and, they'll go and move somewhere else, but, either it's too expensive in another area or what have you. And it just draws them back to where the housing's more affordable and where there's family and support close.
so even if they were able to leave, they'd be leaving behind family and friends. So it's basically kind of choosing a better life, quote unquote, or to stay with the family and friend roots.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was kind of saying. Is it's kind of a tough decision for a lot of people to make, to leave, because it's like they're leaving behind everybody they really know for the most part.
I want to ask this question. Do you feel like there really is a big divide between rich and poor in our country? And if so, what are some of the big factors? Amy, do you mind answering that?
I think there is a divide, but I also think it's kind of a yes and no question, because rich and poor spend money on things that they don't need, both.
Right.
Their priorities can be messed up. They can mismanage money. They can both cheat the system. They can gain money by taking advantage of people. But I also think that people who are in poverty are disadvantaged. They don't have the opportunities that we have. And there is a divide with education. You've got kids who can't focus at school because they don't know where their next meal's coming from, or they're hungry, or they don't know where they're going to lay their head at night. So they can't focus at school. Mm-hmm. And then they go home and they have no one to help them. Mom might be working 2 or 3 jobs and she's just not there to help with homework or help in the learning capacity. So I think that creates a big divide. And I think this pandemic is creating an even bigger divide, because you have kids who can get help and you have kids that don't have access to it. So I think there is a divide in a lot of different areas, but I do believe that they don't have the opportunities that we have been afforded.
Even like the schools that are wanting to do a lot of online stuff, and some kids just don't have access to that, or
right.
Or their parents aren't around, or whatever. So some of the factors that play. What are some of the factors that kind of play into this division, if you will? The easiest way to answer this, well, some people have money, some people don't. That'd be the easiest way to play into it. But I guess I'm looking at more of the if there is an estrangement between the rich and poor, why is it, other than just money? Are there emotional or spiritual reasons?
I mean, I would say that there definitely, is a divide. I mean, I think some of it could be mismanaged money by people who are impoverished, I mean, but I think, it goes back to somewhat being generational. But I mean, then you've got the people, at least like putting it back kind of into a Peoria setting. It's like, the people who are middle class and above, their school districts, even though they are Peoria school districts, they're good. They're getting quality education, like not just passing these kids through, different grades. Whereas some of these, I would say, schools that are like, Peoria Central and some of the ones that are really close to the South End area, they don't have the resources brought in by taxes and whatnot. And, the education just isn't really quality for the most part. Some of these kids are just getting pushed through to graduate because, a lot of places now require a degree to even work a minimum wage job, So I would say education does play a big part in it as well. And the subdivisions of Peoria have some of the best school districts where these middle class kids are going in comparison.
Yeah, I guess we don't really have that here in Effingham, where there's like the south side of the town has worse schools than the north side of town or whatever side, we have one public high school and everybody goes there. And from what it sounds like, Peoria has a major division in there with the resources. I didn't even think about that this far down. That's how middle class I am, I guess.
Right. So the division is kind of a domino effect into everything: schools, work, relationships, people you hang out with, your neighborhood. I mean, it's hard, basically, once you're kind of in there, for lack of a better term, it's kind of hard to make any other circles, I would think.
That's what it really sounds like.
When I think of the battle that we kind of have, obviously I work at a church, I've been working at a church for a long time. I grew up poor, basically. It was a small rural town, so it was a little bit different. Areas, I was afforded opportunities and people that helped me, or I basically, the state basically paid for me to go to college. I mean, there's no way I could have gone to college otherwise. So there were things that helped me get to where I'm at now in some ways. But I've been working with the church for years and years and years. I've helped in inner city missions. I've been around the world in different places, working in, like I said, very poor areas and working with people. I remember being so moved one time in a place I was to leave everything I had with them, and I came home with nothing, just about some clothes on my back. And I was fine with that, because I was just blown away about some of the people I was working with and what they were going through and enduring. I guess here's the thing, though. I really think that people outside the church are really good judges of what the church ought to be doing when it comes to the poor. They are probably better judges than we are sometimes. And I want to know, like, you guys are all three, believers, and have had experiences in church to some degree. So I'm just curious, like, what should the church be doing? Because I don't think we can. The thing that just seems so hard and frustrating is we can't necessarily repeat what the government can do or systems can do, but what should the church be doing? When I say the church, I want you guys to be as practical as possible. And I'm not really looking to the straw man the church. I'm talking about like us, right here, who we are as the church, as believers in Christ. What should we be doing when it comes to helping the poor?
I don't know if we could offer just encouragement and empowerment to these people. I know with a few of my clients, if I have any positive feedback for them, they almost don't know how to accept it. And I've found that I've had to repeat myself a few times of, you're really good at that, or I'm proud of you for this. And they just look at me like it's the first time they've heard it. And while I love that I can be that, it breaks my heart that it's taken this many years for them to hear that. And I think it goes back to kind of the bigger thing we were talking about of the generational hand down, like maybe members of the church, because I guess we're putting it all on them, like they need to break their generational gaps,
Right.
And that makes sense, but why does it have to be someone in their family to break the generational gap? Why can't someone on the outside, someone of the church, slip that into their ear of, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. Just because grandma did it and mom did it and dad did it doesn't mean you.
That requires some relationships, though.
Yeah, and rapport, which in my position, I don't see them only once or twice. I'll see these people for several years, unfortunately.
So you have an opportunity to build that rapport.
I do, specifically in my position, because I do placement. So until the biological parents do their services and a judge says, this is okay, you can go back, I mean, I have them. So the cases I started out with are the cases I still have. And so I get a relationship with these kids, and I tell them, I don't want to be here with you until you're 18, but I am here forever if you need. Even when you age out, get adopted, you go back to your bio parents, whatever that looks like for you, I will still be a constant for you.
You're kind of whispering in their ears the whole time, like, hey, life doesn't have to be like this.
Life doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. So the church then, number one, needs to build rapport with people. And be included. I mean, one thing that's I always found in Corinthians and in James is very, very loud about a church that is arrogant with who they minister to. Like, don't just select people because they have money and they're influential. That we actually should be the opposite. We should be looking for, like Jesus talked about, taking the lowest seat at the table, not the highest one. And he was very adamant and very upset with a lot of religious leaders because they were so stuffy and arrogant. So we have got to. It's part of what you're saying is, I know you do it for your job, but I also know you personally. I mean, it breaks your heart when you see kids in those situations, and that you just naturally reach out and be in the church. So building the relationship and rapport, I think it's excellent. Amy, what do you think?
I think each of us has a responsibility to be the hands and feet of Jesus and serve where we can serve.
Yeah.
I think, you have to use the gifts that God has given you to do what you can do to make a difference. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It might be taking a meal to a single parent who's struggling, or providing transportation to a medical appointment that they don't have access to. It might be sitting with that new foster mom and meeting some need that they have, just supporting those people in those helping professions, but also doing what you can do to help and genuinely love people who are more disadvantaged than us. And it's easy to love like-minded people or people like us. It's very difficult sometimes to love these people. But I think that we need to do that more and better than what we probably do. But there's so many things that go into poverty. I don't think you can just pick one area and say this would fix it or this would help, because not everybody's needs are the same. But I think everybody has a responsibility to do what they can do and use what gifts they have to just bless other people.
That's awesome. Amy, I want to ask you something. It's a little bit related in a way, but you've seen so many things. What really breaks your heart? I mean, it's overwhelming to you with all the experiences that you've had. If you want to come back to it, we can.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. It's sad to see people live like this. It's sad to watch parents get their kids taken from them. It's sad to see someone on probation who you've invested time and energy to try to change their life to only continue to make mistakes and then go to prison. And then you see them back on probation after they get out of prison and nothing has changed. And they say they're never going to end back up, they're never going to end up back on probation, and then they come in through our doors again, or you see their kids, or you see the parent or sister, brother, whatever. It's sad to me when we go into houses and these kids act like this is normal. We go into houses, we have bulletproof vests on and guns and tasers and all this stuff, and they're not bothered by that. And that always breaks my heart that it's just normal for us to be in their lives. Because my kids would freak out if somebody came into my house with a gun or handcuffs.
It's normal for them
but it is
Austin,
normal.
I think you even said that to me when we were talking one-on-one. You said somewhere on the same thing, that you're shocked almost how normal it becomes for kids, to be used to the system, if you will.
So, it really is just normalized in the sense of, when we go, like, especially like in the inner city, like in Peoria, families had, 10 investigations prior. That you walk up, you're like, hey, I'm with DCFS. They're like, oh, hey, come in, like, do your home safety checklist. Here's my kids. Talk to them one-off. Like, they just know our whole procedure and process because they've had so much involvement.
Okay, Austin, I wanted you to, if you would, answer that last question about what can the church do?
Yeah, I would say maybe a couple things, and I would be maybe speaking kind of church as a whole.
Sure.
One thing I think would be super helpful, and I don't know what this would look like exactly, especially kind of in your guys' area specifically, just kind of a more rural area. But I think like almost like a mentoring program would be helpful, where it's like, you just had either, couples or individuals, either one kind of come in with families who would sign up for this program and just mentor them, like, and live life with them in the sense of, I'm going to show you, here's how you do your FAFSA, here's how you get aid to go to college and get an education, or, hey, I'm going to help you apply for jobs, in the area, help get you a job. And if you need transportation, I'll transport you, X amount of times a week to and from your job. Or I don't know, just teaching them even to some extent, maybe how to parent, just like, here are things that are helpful to raise your kids, like spending time with them and teaching them some of those things that could help kind of maybe break that cycle. I would say the other thing too, at least from my field specifically, is foster parents. Really the agency I worked for prior to DCFS, at least, and I think DCFS does it too, to where, they hold events at churches, and churches are a very, very big pull for a lot of our foster parents. And I would say just having, if you want to help, like, and haven't really thought about it in the past, like, there's a huge, huge, huge need. And I think it's Nicole that is a caseworker, I think, correct?
Yeah, Nicole is.
Nicole. And I'm sure Nicole could speak into that too, in the sense of, there are so many kids that are in the foster care system that really and truly need good homes, good families. And to do it from a sense of, man, I'm going to be in this kid's life as I'm needed, whether it's, I'm going to have them in my home for 2 years and they're going to go back to their parents, or, then having the ability maybe to eventually adopt in the future. And that's how, and I've seen, foster parents from churches bring these bio parents with them to church every Sunday, spend time with them, like, let them see the kids that way, develop, transportation, develop relationships with them, help them get jobs, And I think that's a really big influential thing in a person's life that's never had something like that.
So foster parenting would be a huge thing the church could do. And Nicole, you would agree with that, I'm assuming.
Oh, 100%. Gosh, it just, the amount of kids that need that kind of a program, or...
Well, like Austin said, it's amazing how much contact you would have with the biological parents. You might even be able to drag them with you to church.
Right. That would be amazing and I'm sure he's experienced this too. A lot of the time, the foster home becomes a relative. And so you're literally just kind of setting them back into the situation they were in. And not that you want to, of course, you don't want to split families apart. That's not what we're about. But it would kind of take them out of the generational thing. And I don't know, as a body of Christ, anybody with the heart for Jesus is going to want to put that family back together.
Right.
And so I 100% agree with that.
I think some of the things you're bringing up, Austin, and everyone's bringing up, I think there's some things we can actually do, even programmatically as a church, or trying to encourage people in the church to do, because what you're talking about is like life coaching, mentoring, bringing people with you and around. And that could be through as a foster parent, that could be just somebody who's helping. And the great thing about it here in Effingham is that we already have systems that are doing that. For instance, we have a school mentoring program here in town. We also have the Family Life Center, and they are asking for volunteers, people from churches, to come in and be a dad to dads, or be a mom to moms, or be a life coach like what you're discussing. So if people are listening to us say, well, how in the world do I ever get started with that when I really don't have any relationships with anybody? First of all, seek relationships. Secondly, get involved in places where they already are meeting needs, that you can be a part of what they're doing, like the Family Life Center, or like the Unit 40 mentoring here in Effingham. But I'm sure there are plenty of places like that also in Peoria. But if the church isn't going to be the hands and feet of Christ, then who's going to be? Just like you were saying, Amy. I really appreciate your guys' time. I know this has been a little bit scattered. We've had some technical issues and everything going back and forth, but I really appreciate your time. I would like to just kind of end on one note, one little discussion, if we can, just real short, and that just has to do with our faith. And what is it, if you can name one thing, and if you can't, don't worry about it, because I'm putting you on the spot. But if you can name one thing or one teaching or scripture or anything that just comes to mind when it comes to, or what Jesus taught, or something that's in the Bible, that just in your upbringing of faith, what's one thing that's always been motivating to you? What's one thing that's always been you've kind of held to that convicted you when it comes to helping those who are less fortunate? Can you think of anything?
The first thing that comes to my mind is having the same attitude as Jesus Christ. And I can't even tell you where that's at in the Bible. I just know that the Bible says that.
Yes, it does.
But, and lifting others up. So to me, that was the first thing that came to mind, but I've never thought of that before.
That's awesome. That comes out of Philippians 2. There's a very specific passage there about lifting each other up, having the mind of Christ.
I knew that.
Yeah, excellent. No, that's good stuff, Amy.
I think mine is, and you'll probably know the scripture or something, but I'm no different than them. Mm-hmm. I mean, the difference is, well, I guess the difference is I have Jesus, but I don't know their hearts really. I mean, the clientele that I have, they don't think as clearly, and that's due to some of their extracurricular activities. But I mean, I just look at them and think, trauma doesn't have a class, it doesn't hit anybody less than it hits any, very rich people have trauma, very poor people have trauma, the middle class have it. So I don't know exactly what it is that's what they decided to numb themselves with, and why I didn't decide to numb myself with that. So I see it so clearly of, I'm not that different than them. I could have very easily made that decision. So how am I to judge that? And it just makes me love them more and want to help them more. Like, I could have been that person. So how can I help you to move out of that somehow? And not literally move out, but
I'm
just...
with you. I think that's excellent. I think that Jesus talked about that in Luke 7 when the woman in the
Yes.
in the Pharisee in the
Luke
Pharisee's
7.
house, the woman that comes into the Pharisee's house. I mean, I don't want to get into all that, but it's just an excellent passage. It says what you're saying. That how do we view ourselves? We're lost. We're poor. When it comes to our relationship with God, and when we understand what He's given us, our true riches are found in Christ. If that's the case, then anyone can have that. It doesn't matter how poor they are or how rich they are. So therefore, what you're saying, if I can kind of reword it, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what you're kind of saying is the division that we have between rich and poor in this country needs to start. The only way that divide is going to start to close is if it starts to close with us. We need to start seeing everybody the same, instead of making those kind of sharp judgments and classifications.
Right, which I am guilty of making those judgments. I am completely guilty of that, but
we need to be aware of that.
But I mean, I get humble every day. I feel like God humbles me every day. Like, remember this, Nicole? And I'm like, ooh, yes, I do.
What about you, Austin?
Okay. So I would say just generally, just how Jesus lived his life and spent his time. It's like he's hanging with the people who are poor. He's hanging, there's the exceptions here and there who he did hang out with rich people, and brought them to him. But it's for the most part, it's going to be your prostitutes and poor people that he's spending his time with and ministering to. And that's kind of a reflection of his life, and that's how I think, we need to live our lives as well.
That's really good. It seems like we say we need to be like Jesus, but we don't really want to be like Jesus. Because when you look at Jesus, he's hanging out with the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the beggars and the paralyzed and the lame and the sick. Yeah, you're exactly right. So just purely taking his example, we should have compassion and figure out somehow, some way to help the person next to us. Hey, this has really been good. Any last comments you guys want to make? Because I don't want to feel like, oh, now we're done. But anything that comes to mind. Okay. Well, hey, thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it. And thank you for listening on the podcast. And I guess if I have one kind of closing comment or wish for this whole thing is, like I said, obviously we can talk to her blue in the face. It doesn't change necessarily things that are out there and what's going on. But we weren't told by Jesus to necessarily turn the world upside down and make it perfect. We were told, like Amy said earlier, to be the hands and feet of Christ and then allow God to do his work. He's the only one that can change things for real. He's the only one that can take something that's overwhelming and make it actually manageable. So someone told me this a long time ago, and I think it's really good. We need to work during the day as if we're in control and then sleep at night as if God is. And that's not as in like he's not. But I mean, it's just kind of an analogy, meaning the fact that God's in control during the day and the night. But I think that when he has called us to be his hands and feet, then that means, we need to be busy about that. But then go to sleep at night, because we don't need to lose sleep over all these issues and problems. That's why I encourage you three in. I know you three have some really tough jobs, and I don't want your job, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not sure I can handle your jobs because of the things you do. But I pray, and I want to pray for you before we leave here. I sincerely am saying this, not because we're on a podcast or anything. Hopefully you guys know me. Some of you know me at least a little bit now, what my heart's like. But I really am saying this sincerely. I really want to pray over you that you get some sleep at night, that you will start to really trust God with the very situations that you find yourself in all the time, because you can't save the world, as much as we want to. And that's not our calling. Your calling is to just day at a time try to be like Jesus, like Austin said. So let me pray that over you. Is that okay? And we'll end it that way. Father God, I sincerely just thank you so much for Amy and Austin and Nicole. I just thank you for their hearts, the work that they do. I just pray for your blessing over Nicole and in Kemmer Village and the kids that she works with. I just pray for your hand to be on them. But I pray more than anything, you'll give the fire and energy and passion that Nicole needs at the right times, the wisdom, the right things to say at the right times. And most importantly, help her to trust that you are actually giving her those words, and for her to sleep at night, knowing that you're in charge, that you're going to change things. And it may not be the way we think it's going to be, but Father, help Nicole to have that kind of trust. Father, I pray over Austin. I pray that it's just a tough work he's got in a city of Peoria. And Father, he's got to feel overwhelmed from day to day when he gets calls and has to rush to the hospital and rush over to see families and be with kids and have to deal with situations and families that just don't want their kids anymore. I mean, Father, help him when he sees all this not to get discouraged, but instead help him to have wisdom and strength to say the right things, do the right things, and most importantly, just to act simply as best he can, like Jesus, and help him not to get bogged down by the legalism that might be around him, by other Christians that might try to drag him down. Father, I pray instead that he just might see you in that real way. Father, I also pray for Amy, and I pray for all the people that work in her office, and the people that are associated with the probation office, the DCFS, and the law enforcement. And there's just so many people that are trying to have good hearts and are trying to do some really good things. But Father, I just pray you help Amy to realize that she can only do what she can do. Help her also to sleep at night. Help her to just really give it her best to try to be your voice the best she can. And Father, I pray more than anything that these three might find the strength to pray in the morning and pray at night, just as a constant reminder that you really are in charge and you care. So in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.